to order. It's Wednesday, February 12th, 2025, and we're here to discuss Shoshone County Fire Department District 2 strike team assignment in the Palisades. And I'll turn it over to Chief.
Okay, so I kind of just gave you a brief timeline. So the fire in the Palisades neighborhood started on January 7th at 10:30 in the morning. We actually got an email the following day from Idaho Fire Chiefs Association. So I don't know exactly how the request went from California, but somehow it funneled to where the Idaho Fire Chiefs was the one that sent out the mass email looking for people, and that actually worked really, really slick because they just have all the contacts. So basically, they were sent out an email looking for any department that could spare resources to go to California. So I put our name in the bucket. We didn't find out until that night at 9 o'clock that we were actually selected and we were deploying. It was around 9 o'clock. It might have been a little earlier than that. I can't remember exactly, but it was in the evening. So we committed to taking one of our Type 1 engines, which was the full-size structural engine, with 4 of us. I ended up also taking my Chief's pickup vehicle, but it wasn't part of the deployment package, and we just paid for the fuel on that. We just decided, when talking about it and going that far, it would be nice to have a second set of wheels in case something broke down and the whole stuff, and so it just kind of tagged along. But officially, I was part of the 4-man engine company on all the paperwork. So it was myself, Captain Rochford, Lieutenant Renge, and then Firefighter Zimmerman that deployed. We left the next morning at 5 o'clock. We met up with the other North Idaho folks. They came through Shoshone because we went through Montana and down to Salt Lake. So they were coming this way anyway. But it was ourselves, Paradise Valley, which is up near Bonners Ferry. It's a little tiny department up there. Selkirk Fire, Sandpoint area. Timberlake, which is Athol. Northern Lakes, their engine came out of Hayden. And then an engine from Cooney County Fire and Rescue and an engine from Worley. So we sent quite a few resources, and all of those were the big Type 1 engines. Other than Paradise Valley's, they sent a brush truck. So we had a bunch of big fire engines and a brush truck that headed down. And then we had our team leader, our strike team leader. We sent 2 different strike team leaders from Cooney County. That ended up being the gentleman from Timberlake ended up being our strike team leader, and then Chief Belmont from Northern Lakes ended up being a strike team leader with a different team down there. So it took us 2 days to get there. A lot of the fire engines are governed at 65 miles an hour. So a couple of them only went 60. So it's not a quick trip down. We spent the night at Salt Lake City, and then we got to the Beaumont base camp, which is outside of LA, at 5:30 on the 11th. All the engines had to go through a mechanical check. I don't know, there's been lots of rumors going around that it was EPA checks. It had zero to do with any EPA stuff. They were just looking for mechanical stuff. Brakes, lights, tire quality. They would just quickly look under the engine to make sure everything looked like it wasn't falling apart. And there was a lot of engines that didn't pass that. Luckily, our engine passed fine. The Timberlake engine did not pass. And there was a few other engines that had issues the day before when we got there. And so actually the next morning, we thought we would deploy out right away. Well, they wouldn't deploy you if you didn't have a full strike team. And so there was enough engines that were broke down that they were making strike teams up. But we ended up just sitting in the camp almost an entire day, doing nothing, just wanting to go out and get to work.
And they fix that stuff for free, right? For the trucks, the other trucks.
Yeah, so one of them, we ended up working with an engine from Emmett Fire, which is down in southern Idaho. Their engine had actually gotten there the day before, went through inspection, was driving from one camp to the other, and I'd never heard of it because I'm not a mechanical guy, but they had a runaway diesel motor and basically blew the motor on their engine. So they were lowboying another engine from Emmett Fire to California, and Cal Fire is going to replace the motor on their engine, and so it's incredible. I know that Timberlake Fire had a problem with their engine. They had the same thing where they had to get one lowboyed from Athol down to California. Well, so anyway, so because of a lot of the logistical stuff like that, we spent a day doing nothing. Then on the 11th, actually it's the 12th, we were notified that day that we were officially being assigned to Idaho Task Force 3, and we were being deployed to Palisades. So that morning, or actually it was kind of midday. We drove from the one camp to the other camp with the traffic and where it was. It was about a 3-hour drive between the two camps. So we got there, we got checked in. It was getting towards evening. They told us, yeah, you guys probably aren't going to go out tonight. You'll be going out first thing in the morning. They're like, so we had like, just set your tent up here in the beach and we'll send you out in the morning. And it was super windy that day and it's kind of a pain, but we got our tent set up and literally we were just throwing stuff in the tent. And they're like, oh, never mind, you guys are getting deployed right now. And so we took everything down really quick and got in our engines and took off. But yeah, so we were assigned into Palisades and we were just structure response. So we basically drove up into the neighborhood. We got there, when we first got there and deployed, it was was it 8:30 at night when we went up there. So it was already getting dark. So kind of weird responding to an area for, big fire when we know nothing about the local area.
Yeah.
And since we were with a group of all Idaho people, none of us did. So it was just kind of a weird feeling knowing we're just going up to this area and we'll see what we get. You can't see anything. But when we got up there, you can see little orange glows here and there, little tiny fires, but the big fire had all been knocked out by that time. And we were literally just, the first night, they're just drive around the neighborhood and, get out, walk around, use your thermal imaging camera, and look for hot spots. If you saw them hot, put it out, and just basically patrol. Well, we ended up working, our official shift was 24 on, 24 off. But it was really not 24 on. By the time that we'd get out, because after the first night, the whole rest of the time they were putting us up in motels. They were quite a ways away. We stayed mostly by LAX, because around that area there was no power, there's no water, everything. So by the time we'd get from our hotel, we'd drive to the base camp, we'd sit through our briefings, eat a quick breakfast, and get our sack lunch, which was our sack lunch and dinner. It was all the rest of the food we would get for the 24 hours. Then we'd go out on the line for 24 hours. We'd come back in, kind of demobilize, and go through the checkout process and figure out what motel they were going to put us in that night. By then, by the time we'd get to the motel, it was usually about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, like 36 hours later. Then we'd eat dinner, basically go to sleep, or some of the guys would go out, which I was not brave enough to do that. I would go to sleep, wake up the next morning, and do a whole nother 30-some hour shift. So it was brutal. We did that straight for 2 weeks. But yeah, some of the pictures, the first page is just the group from North Idaho that we were assigned to. This is what the Palisades neighborhood looked like. I mean, obviously I have hundreds of pictures and none of it does it justice if you're there, because you drive for block after block after block or mile after mile, and this is what it looks like. Every now and then there's a few houses here and there that were saved. I think most of it was just pure luck that they were saved. Some of it was some of the stuff I'll talk about with fire prevention, things that we could try to do here. But this is just what was left. These fires burned so hot. If it was flammable or it could melt under those temperatures, it was gone. I mean, by the end, the first week and a half, there was nobody allowed up in the neighborhood other than first responders and utility workers. The last half of the final week, they started letting homeowners get back in there, so we started helping people kind of sift through the rubble, but there was literally nothing to find. I mean, Kate might have told you, we had one lady that we were helping sift through her mother's house. Her mother was an Olympic gold medalist in shot put, and they were looking for her medals. The guys ended up finding part of the box that the medals were in, but the medals were completely melted. We never found them. But that's how almost all of this was. There's just nothing left in these homes. And I'm sure if you've listened in the media on this, there's lots of controversy and there's lots of pointing the fingers of what caused it. From the big reservoir that was right outside this neighborhood that didn't have water in it because it was down for repairs, and the hydrants running out of water and stuff. All that might have contributed slightly. Mm-hmm. But one homeowner we talked to, he didn't evacuate. He stayed. And then he's like, I was going to evacuate and realized there was just no way. The fire was too big by that point. Roads were blocked off. He's like, I couldn't get out. But he's like, I've only lived in California for a few years. He's like, I spent most of my life in Florida. He's like, I've been through tons of hurricanes. He's like, this reminded me of a hurricane. He's like, you'd go outside, 100-mile-an-hour winds, you can't hardly stand up. There's debris flying everywhere. He's like, but the difference is, he's like, a hurricane, it's all water. He's like, this was all fire and sparks flying everywhere. And he's like, most people think of this and think of wildfires as one big fire front coming through. He's like, that's not what this was like at all. because he lived up on the hill, kind of overlooking the whole valley. He's like, when I looked out of my house into the valley, he's like, it wasn't a fire, it was hundreds of fires. He's like, everywhere these embers were landing, it was lighting up another fire. Talking to the weather people that were at the incident command post, they figured it was about a 60 to 75% light rate. For every ember that landed, 60 to 70 of them were starting another fire. And then getting big quick with the high winds. So it was a non-stoppable fire. It was traveling not through the neighborhood because it slowed down, but across the hillside, it was traveling 300 yards a minute through the hillside.
300 yards a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So you can't get in front of that.
You can't run it.
And then and the hydrants running out of water, which they did. But if you think about it, there's not a water system in the world. I mean, they're meant for us to hook up to a hydrant and be able to fight a house or two.
Mm-hmm.
None of them have enough water in the system to fight hundreds of structure fires at the same time. There's just not a system that's built for that.
And that's kind of one of my questions is like our water outfits here is how many hydrants can each one have open at the same time? I mean, do we?
Right. It depends if they're all attached to the same main.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're really pulling a lot of water out of 2 or 3, I mean, you get much more than that. And all of them will start dropping their pressure.
Okay.
Now, everyone's different because wherever the hydrant is and where it's at in the line, they have different pressures and stuff. But they're not meant to tap 3, 4. I mean, like 5, 6, 7, 20, 30. They're just not meant for that.
Okay.
Well, even on this one, I've done lots of research on this just because I was curious after being there.
Yeah.
If you look at their system here, I mean, there's lots of redundancy with their water system when there's, what towers or wells or different reservoirs that all backfeed into each other. But all of them, the pipes only can flow so much water.
Yeah.
And so that particular area, where they were trying to draw so much water, all these fire engines attached to these hydrants, it just couldn't keep up. And it wasn't even a matter that there wasn't enough water. There wasn't a mechanism to get the water there fast enough. It just couldn't flow through the pipes quick enough to do it.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the case with any water system anywhere. This will be interesting to see from this if they change how they design water systems to try to accommodate more. But I don't think you'll ever get one because it would be so expensive to fight this big of fire.
Yeah.
But it needs to probably do a better job than it did.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so the next picture will just kind of give you an example of some houses came really, really close to catching fire and didn't. So both of these pictures, the adjacent houses next door burned down. So there was a lot of heat going up against these two houses. Well, you'll see what happened with the houses, what their weak point was. Luckily there, almost all the houses are stucco walls and tile roofs, which will fare better than our homes here.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the windows that gave out. The windows just can't tolerate that kind of heat, and the windows will break out. Well, then as soon as you have the window out, now you have an opening for any kind of ember or something to go in.
Okay.
So that was the primary mechanism for these buildings to go from building to building to building to building.
Went through the window.
They would go through the windows.
I'll be darned.
And so you'll see these two ones, they came super close, but these were just lucky enough where LA Fire stopped both of these.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a few more pictures of where you can see that, because at first we were like, well, how did it not catch fire?
Yeah.
Because we weren't really supposed to go in the buildings unless we saw something. They didn't want to just go in people's houses. Well, there was actually one that we went up to right near these two houses where it actually burned through the wall. It's like, okay, how did that not go? I'm like, well, I want to go into this one, first of all, because I want to take the thermal imaging camera and make sure that they really did get it out. There's nothing in the wall. But then when we went in the house, you could see that they had sprayed water. So they actually, the fire department really did save that home, and they saved these ones. They just couldn't save them all. But yeah, so it was the windows was the primary thing. Now, this same homeowner that I was talking about that came from Florida, he was talking about his house, and he's like, a month ago, he's like, I was really complaining because we just replaced all the windows in our home. He's like, a new thing in California is they have to have double pane laminate windows with that plastic laminate, almost like an automobile window, is what they require for homes now. So they hold up better. He's like, I was so mad and thought it was so ridiculous and it was so much more expensive. He's like, but my next door neighbor's house caught fire. He's like, I'm home. It's fully evolved outside. He's like, the windows of his house, he's like, they were so hot you could not touch the glass windows of your, or they would have burned your hand. That's how hot the windows of his home was, and all of them stayed intact. Not a single one of them broke.
Wow.
He's like, that's really the only thing that saved my house. So it's like, well, okay, well.
Now, they're kind of like a shatterproof window, right?
Yeah, and they have a layer of plastic in between it. So even if it does break, it holds all the glass together.
Okay.
Yeah, front. I don't know if you've seen like a front windshield of a car or something.
Yeah.
The reason, like when you get a rock chip, the whole window doesn't break or it doesn't come right through the window, is there's actually glass and then a layer of plastic and then glass.
Mm-hmm.
It's a laminate layer in there, and that holds all the glass together. So like even if the glass cracks, it doesn't open up. So that's what this is. I have no idea what a laminate window for a building costs. I'm sure they're expensive, but and then the next page is actually a picture locally here. This was another area where they say a lot of these fires started. Is the vent opening is in attics, so this is just a picture of a vent opening on the roof of an attic. I didn't even realize till I was down there. I guess they actually sell fire or like spark resistant vent attic covers. Never even heard of them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do some more research on that because that's something that could make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously people that have eaves that aren't enclosed, any place you can get a spark up in somewhere, especially with 100-mile-an-hour winds. I mean, we rarely get hundreds. We'll get 60s commonly with thunderstorms. So any of those, when you're going to get any kind of ember that'll get into someplace that's flammable and has a place to land, it's a case for a fire. But and then the last thing, I'm just like, my recommendations from here, I mean, other than legislative changes requiring more, safety stuff in homes, which is hard because it's kind of a, screwed either way. It makes the home safer, but it's really expensive and people can't afford it. So it's like, I don't know. So around here, it's just fire smart your property. Making those defensible areas around your home where you don't have a bunch of flammable stuff right up against your house. You trim your branches, get rid of dead stuff. Don't plant flammable, like a lot of the green shrubbery type plants that people like to plant because they're pretty and they're easy to maintain and they don't take a lot of water. A lot of those are really, really flammable, and when they catch fire, it's almost like there's an accelerant poured on them and they really burn hot and fast. So, but a lot of people put those around their houses because they're easy to maintain, and so yeah, those are bad. You need like the juniper style trees or shrubs,
Like the arborvitaes and things like that. Okay.
So yeah, those are not the best thing to have around your house. So, that's kind of my takeaway here. I wish I could come in and say, you know what, if we did this, it'll never happen.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest with you, if we have drought conditions like they had, I mean, they had less than an inch of rainfall in 12 months in LA before this. 100-mile-an-hour winds and an ignition point, the same thing's going to happen here.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing you're going to do to stop it. The best fire department in the world's not going to stop that until the winds die down.
Yeah.
So
That's amazing how the heat can just melt metal like that.
Yeah.
Melt.
Right. You look at some of the cars and like a little bit of the frames left, but like even like the engine compartment and everything, there's just pools of melted metal on the ground that have now solidified. But
It's almost like a forge.
Mm-hmm. And the one thing there too, for those people, not only even the houses that survived. I mean, it was weird going in there because obviously it was a wind event initially. So there's branches and there's just stuff, lawn furniture, and there's everywhere. It was just a mess, just stuff strewn everywhere. So we did spend a lot of the days just helping clean up stuff. We piled up brush and we put lawn furniture kind of back in people's yards, and we did a lot of that too. Mm-hmm. So it was quite. It was kind of a surreal event being there. Probably never see anything close to that again in my life. I hope not anyway, for anybody's sake. But yeah, it's an unstoppable force when you just get all those conditions together. But just in the neighborhoods where we were, I guess 11 people died in those neighborhoods that we were patrolling.
That's pretty good.
Really, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
So Palisades, the Palisades area, I don't know if you guys are all familiar with it. I wasn't before, but they're real steep kind of canyons that you'll kind of go through, and then there'll be a neighborhood. But really, Palisades was two separate areas. So you drive over this one canyon, there's a bunch of really expensive houses. Like one of the piles of rubble we looked at, the neighbor's like, yeah, that was a $120 million home that's just rubble. But so lots of houses. And then there was a pretty steep hillside, which was just all, grass, basically, or sagebrush. And then the other part of the Palisades where there was a neighborhood and all the businesses. Well, the fire started on the one side where there was just homes. It sounds like what fire resources were there had all responded up to that neighborhood because that's where the fire was, and that's where they had multiple structure fires. Well, we were talking to one of the sheriff officers who responded to the call. He's like, I was supposed to go over to the other area where basically the bigger part of town was and evacuate people. He's like, first of all, he's like, nobody was listening to me. Nobody wanted to evacuate. They're like, oh, they were sure the fire department would get the fire out. It's on the other side of the hill. He's like, and then also you could see the fire start creeping over the hill. And then everybody panicked and started heading out. And he's like, it instantly clogged the roads. He's like, so then all the fire apparatus that are over there now couldn't get there. They just could not get back to the other side of the bigger neighborhood. And that's the one that was completely wiped out. He's like, but there was no fire engines because they just physically, there was no way to get them there anymore.
Traffic blocked them all.
Yep. And you know, sure you've seen the picture of that tractor pushing all the cars out. That was trying to clear the road to get them up there. But by the time they got anybody up there, it was just too late. It was way too big a fire. I mean, but there was hundreds of buildings on fire, and it just went until it hit the Pacific Ocean.
And those people in those cars had to.
They got out and ran. A couple things. When they're going down the hill, and again, they're pretty narrow little valleys or canyons, but it got so dense with smoke they couldn't see. So it'd be like driving in really bad fog here, and then you get a couple people that run into each other or whatever, and then it quickly just became where nobody was moving, and then the fire was just getting closer and closer and closer, and finally law enforcement, so he's like, we're yelling to people, just get out of your cars and run, get out of your cars and run. Jeez. So, and there was another way out of that community, but you basically had to go through the fire to get there, because the fire kind of came down and separated the two access points. So you either had a choice on one side or the other, but if you couldn't make it from one to the other, they were on opposite sides of the hill. And there was a big cliff in front of that down to the ocean. So they were pretty stuck.
Oh, that's amazing.
But anyway, yeah, it was a cool experience, I think, for our guys. I think they were, as sick as firefighters are, they were hoping that there would be more fire than we were fighting when we got there, but there wasn't a lot of that. But it was still a cool experience.
And you guys made the taxpayers some money.
Yeah.
You know, it was a good deal.
Yeah, thank goodness our piece of equipment survived, and we only had one little tiny mechanical issue with the brake. Those hills are pretty steep there, and it got to the point they'd pull on the air brakes when they would go to stop, but it wouldn't hold the engine anymore, so we'd have to chalk it. It's like, all right, but they had a whole mechanic area set up. It was actually great. If we tried to fix that same thing here, it'd take weeks. By the time we get the right mechanic and the right part, we pull up there to the Cal Fire's mechanic area, which was in a parking lot of a high school. 3 mechanics came out and they looked at it like, oh yeah, we can fix this. We're actually going to fix both the brake canisters on both sides of the rear dualies. They had them replaced and we were out of it in 45 minutes.
Wow.
It was like, all right, that's how it should be. So.
And none of you guys got injured?
Nope, no injuries, no issues. So, yeah.
Sleep deprived, sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a good experience, I bet.
So just pray to God that it never happens here.
Yeah.
Like that. But really, I mean, the closest thing I could think of here would be like the 1910 fires.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was kind of what they experienced there, which is a lot more buildings. But yeah, it's just.
All right.
But this is some good reading on the back.
Yeah.
List of recommendations.
And that didn't come from me. That's right out of the Fire Smart program.
Okay.
So.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You got any questions, Dan? Or?
Nope, in fact, I've kind of heard part of this story. We had our fire chiefs meeting this morning, and just got back from our LEPC meeting, so it kind of, of course, it's got to give us a little bit of practice for this one. But we're good to hear
Well,
about it.
I appreciate you coming down and talking to us about it. It's really interesting.
You bet.
It's good stuff for how we keep prepared and how we respond
Yeah, it's all learning.
and be resilient.
Yeah. Statewide, though, it was a really good exercise for Idaho now. So I don't know that we've ever practiced trying to get that many resources together that quickly. So even if there's a large event somewhere in Idaho, now we discovered a super good mechanism through that Idaho Fire Chiefs link to really get a bunch of people quick. Because really what took so long to get us deployed was after we put ourselves on the list, getting CAL FIRE to officially say, yes, you guys can come and we'll pay for you. That took a while. But had we needed to, we could have had crews out the door in 2-3 hours or less. There was just a big delay getting the formal approval. But had it been a local thing, we could have had resources out the door really fast. Even if we were going to, central Idaho or southern Idaho, it would have been So it's good to know that that system worked.
Yeah, exactly.
So
All right.
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You guys have a wonderful day. Stay warm.
Glad everybody's in one piece and your truck's in one
Yes.
piece.
Me too. Maybe a little nervous. I won't lie.
All right. Well,
Way to go with the fire truck.
adjourn the meeting.